Between 1883 and 1886, over 200 patients entered Louisville General Hospital, alive and never left. Their bodies vanished without burial, their families received no word, and their deaths enriched one man who had sworn an oath to heal. The gaslight flickered against rain-streaked windows on the night of October 23, 1886, as Dr. Edmund Hartwell made his final rounds through the cramped wards of Louisville General Hospital. His polished leather boots echoed against worn wooden floors as he paused beside each bed, studying faces with the cold calculation of a merchant appraising livestock. In his medical bag, beneath surgical instruments and bottles of laudanum, lay contracts that revealed the horrifying truth about America's most trusted physician. This is the story of how one man transformed healing into horror, turning his hospital into a marketplace where human lives were bought and sold to the highest bidder. In 1886, Louisville, Kentucky thrived as a bustling river city where paddle-wheel steamboats carried cargo and dreams along the muddy Ohio River. Tobacco warehouses lined the waterfront, their brick facades hiding the wealth that flowed through this gateway to the American South. Yet beneath the veneer of prosperity, a shadow industry flourished in the narrow alleyways and forgotten basements of the city's medical district. Medical schools across America faced a desperate shortage of cadavers for anatomical study. Legal sources were scarce, expensive, and heavily regulated. This scarcity created a lucrative black market that would corrupt even those sworn to preserve life. And no one exploited this demand more ruthlessly than Dr. Edmund Hartwell. Born in 1851 to a Methodist minister in rural Bardstown, Kentucky, Edmund Hartwell showed early promise as a scholar and healer. He earned his medical degree from the University of Louisville in 1878, graduating with highest honors and the admiration of his professors. Colleagues remembered him as brilliant, meticulous, and possessed of an almost supernatural ability to diagnose ailments that confounded other physicians. But something sinister lay beneath Hartwell's polished exterior. During his residency, nurses began to whisper about his peculiar habits. He showed unusual interest in patients who had no family, no visitors, no one to ask questions when they failed to return home. He spent countless hours in the hospital's basement morgue, claiming to conduct research that never appeared in medical journals. The first victim was Adelaide Morrison, a 68-year-old widow who arrived at Louisville General in February 1883 with severe pneumonia. Mrs. Morrison had traveled from her small farm outside the city seeking treatment, carrying her life savings of $37 sewn into the lining of her worn coat. Sister Margaret O'Sullivan, the Irish head nurse who ran the women's ward with iron discipline and genuine compassion, tended to Mrs. Morrison personally. The elderly woman responded remarkably well to treatment. Her fever broke, her breathing cleared, and she spoke eagerly of returning to tend her chickens and vegetable garden. She was sitting up in bed that evening, asking for paper to write a letter to her neighbor. Sister Margaret would later testify, her voice barely above a whisper. I told her she'd be going home within the week. She smiled and said she couldn't wait to see her cats again. When Sister Margaret returned for morning rounds, Mrs. Morrison's bed was empty. Her belongings had vanished. Dr. Hartwell's notation in the chart read simply, "Patient expired during the night from respiratory complications. Body released for immediate burial." But there had been no burial. Mrs. Morrison's corpse was already aboard a riverboat bound for Cincinnati, carefully preserved in ice and straw, destined for the dissection tables of the Medical College of Ohio. Dr. Hartwell had received $50 for her body, more than most working men earned in 2 months. What made Hartwell's crimes particularly heinous was not just the killing, but the methodical way he selected his victims. He studied admission records like a predator studying prey, identifying patients who fit precise criteria: the elderly, the friendless, those whose deaths would raise no suspicion or official inquiry. His method was as calculated as it was cruel. After selecting a victim, Hartwell would wait until the night shift when fewer staff members were present. He would then administer carefully measured doses of morphine or chloral hydrate, substances that induced respiratory failure while leaving no obvious signs of murder. To any cursory examination, these patients appeared to have succumbed to their existing ailments. The hospital's primitive record-keeping system made concealment easier. Death certificates were often signed without thorough examination, particularly for elderly patients or those with known illnesses. Bodies were typically claimed by family within days, but for those with no relatives, disposal fell to the hospital's discretion. Hartwell had established connections with a network of body dealers who operated along the Ohio River. These men, known as resurrection men, had previously relied on robbing fresh graves under cover of darkness. But Hartwell offered something far more valuable: fresh cadavers with complete medical documentation and no questions asked.
The trade was brutally efficient. Bodies were loaded onto riverboats at night, hidden beneath legitimate cargo. They traveled to medical schools in Cincinnati, Chicago, and as far east as Philadelphia, where desperate anatomy professors paid premium prices for quality specimens. Hartwell's reputation for providing fresh, well-preserved corpses made him the most sought-after supplier in the region. By 1885, Hartwell's operation had expanded beyond Louisville General. He had recruited Dr. Marcus Whitmore from St. Joseph's Infirmary and Dr. Catherine Blackwell from the Women's Medical Institute. This unholy alliance controlled the flow of bodies across 3 hospitals, maximizing both their victim pool and their profits. Dr. Blackwell proved particularly ruthless. A pioneer among female physicians, she used her position to target vulnerable women who sought treatment for female troubles. These patients, often suffering from treatable conditions, would mysteriously succumb to sudden complications under her care. The conspiracy might have continued indefinitely, but for the courage of one woman who refused to remain silent. Sister Margaret O'Sullivan had kept meticulous personal records of every patient under her care. Unlike the hospital's official ledgers, her notes contained detailed observations about patient conditions, family connections, and expected outcomes. As the months passed, she noticed a disturbing pattern. Patients who showed clear signs of recovery were dying at unprecedented rates under Hartwell's care. In her private journal, discovered years later, Sister Margaret wrote, "God forgive me for my silence, but I fear something unspeakable walks these halls. Patients who laugh and speak of home in the evening are found cold and still by dawn. Their families are told they died peacefully, but I have seen no peace in their final moments." The truth began to unravel in September 1886, when James Kellerman arrived at Louisville General. A 45-year-old carpenter who had fallen from scaffolding, suffered a broken leg and severe bruising, but was expected to make a full recovery. What made him different from Hartwell's typical victims was his large, devoted family who maintained constant vigil at his bedside. On the night of September 15th, Kellerman's eldest son, Thomas, had stepped outside for air when he witnessed something that would expose the entire conspiracy. Through a basement window, he saw Dr. Hartwell and 2 unknown men loading what appeared to be a body wrapped in canvas onto a horse-drawn cart. He followed the cart through Louisville's narrow streets to a warehouse near the river docks. There he watched in horror as the men unloaded their cargo alongside barrels and crates marked for shipment to various cities. The body was placed in a specially constructed icebox and loaded aboard a riverboat bound for Cincinnati. Disturbed but unsure of what he had witnessed, Thomas shared his concerns with Sister Margaret. Her years of suppressed suspicions suddenly crystallized into terrible certainty. Together, they began investigating the hospital's records, comparing official death certificates with Sister Margaret's private observations. The evidence was overwhelming. In 3 years, the death rate among Hartwell's patients was nearly 4 times higher than other physicians at the hospital. Most disturbingly, the majority of these deaths occurred among patients who had shown clear signs of recovery. Sister Margaret faced an agonizing decision. Exposing the conspiracy would destroy the hospital's reputation and likely end her career. But her conscience would no longer allow silence in the face of such evil. On October 1, 1886, she walked into the office of District Attorney William Morrison, ironically the nephew of Adelaide Morrison, Hartwell's first victim. The evidence she presented was so shocking that Morrison initially refused to believe it. But as investigators dug deeper, the full scope of Hartwell's crimes emerged. Hidden ledgers revealed payments totaling over $15,000 from medical schools across the region. Correspondence detailed specific requests for bodies with particular characteristics. Most damning, they discovered contracts specifying delivery schedules and pricing structures for human corpses. The investigation uncovered a sophisticated operation that extended far beyond Louisville. Hartwell had established relationships with anatomy professors who asked no questions about the source of their specimens. Some schools paid premium prices for bodies that came with complete medical histories, making them more valuable for teaching purposes. On October 24, 1886, police raided Louisville General Hospital just as Dr. Hartwell prepared to claim his next victim, 72-year-old Mary Catherine Sullivan, a seamstress who had come to the hospital with pneumonia and was recovering well. The arrest scene was described by the Louisville Courier-Journal as something from the pages of Gothic horror. Hartwell was found in the basement morgue, standing over Mrs. Sullivan's unconscious form with a syringe in his hand. The elderly woman was barely breathing, having been injected with a near-fatal dose of morphine.
During the 6-week trial in the spring of 1887, prosecutors revealed the full extent of Hartwell's crimes. They presented evidence of at least 237 murders, although the actual number likely exceeded 300. The prosecution painted a picture of a man so consumed by greed that he had transformed healing into killing, turning his hospital into a slaughterhouse. Hartwell's defense team attempted to portray him as a dedicated physician whose only crime was providing cadavers for legitimate medical education. They argued that his victims were already dying and that he had simply hastened inevitable deaths while serving the greater good of medical advancement. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Edmund Hartwell was found guilty on 43 counts of murder and sentenced to death by hanging. His co-conspirators, Dr. Whitmore and Dr. Blackwell, received life sentences in the Kentucky State Penitentiary. On August 14, 1888, before a crowd of nearly 5,000 spectators, Dr. Edmund Hartwell was executed in the courtyard of Jefferson County Jail. His final words were reportedly, "I served the cause of medical science. History will vindicate my methods." But what makes this case truly haunting is not just the scale of Hartwell's crimes, but the questions it raises about trust and medical authority. His victims placed their faith in a system designed to heal them, only to be murdered by the very man they trusted with their lives. I want to hear from you in the comments below. What state are you watching from? And do stories like this make you question how much we truly know about the medical professionals we trust with our lives? Your thoughts and theories always fascinate me. The Hartwell case exposed the dark underbelly of America's medical establishment during a critical period of expansion and modernization. It led to stricter regulations on anatomical procurement, better hospital oversight, and new laws governing medical practice. But it also revealed how easily the oath to do no harm could be corrupted by greed and ambition. Sister Margaret O'Sullivan continued working at Louisville General Hospital until her retirement in 1924. She never married, dedicating her life to patient care and advocacy. In her final interview, given just months before her death, she reflected on the Hartwell case. Evil can wear the face of respectability and speak with the voice of authority. We must never stop questioning, never stop watching, never stop protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Louisville General Hospital was renamed and restructured following the scandal. The basement morgue where Hartwell prepared his victims was sealed and eventually filled with concrete. But workers in the building report that even today, more than a century later, the basement holds an unusual chill that no amount of heating can dispel. The medical schools that purchased Hartwell's victims continued operating, though several faced investigations and reforms. The skeletons and anatomical specimens derived from his crimes were used for teaching purposes well into the 20th century. A grim reminder that the foundations of medical education were built, quite literally, on the bones of the innocent. Perhaps most disturbing is the question of how many other Dr. Hartwells operated in America's rapidly expanding medical system. The investigation revealed that body trafficking was far more widespread than authorities had imagined, suggesting that Hartwell's crimes represented not an aberration, but a symptom of a much larger disease infecting American medicine. If you found this investigation as disturbing as I did, please subscribe for more deep dives into the darkest chapters of medical history. The stories of these forgotten victims deserve to be told, and their suffering must not be forgotten. As we trust our lives to medical professionals today, we must remember the lesson of Dr. Edmund Hartwell, that evil can hide behind the most respected facades, and that vigilance is the price of safety. The oath to do no harm means nothing if we do not hold those who swear it accountable for keeping their word. In the end, the true horror of Hartwell's crimes lies not in the number of people he killed, but in the betrayal of the sacred trust between doctor and patient. That trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired, leaving us to wonder, in our moments of greatest vulnerability, how do we know whom we can truly trust?